Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to introduce my guest for today's episode, Boris Berjan. Boris is the head of a company called Theia. Theia makes a great application for continuous glucose monitoring. I've been a huge fan of CGMs for many, many years because I think they are the ultimate biofeedback mechanism. So we discuss how he got into this and how powerful this program can really be. So please enjoy my conversation with Boris Berjan.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry. Ready for some thought-provoking cerebral whipping and the destruction of ridiculous medical dogma? Want to shift those stale, moldy old paradigms? Well then, don that thinking cap of yours. Get down in the cave and join our host, Dr. Stephen Barrett, for this week's episode. Let's start spelunking.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry. I'm here with Boris Berjan, and we're going to talk about something that I think is a great biohacking tool and has tremendous utilization if you're trying to improve your overall metabolism and optimize yourself, and that's continuous glucose monitoring. Boris, thanks for coming on the show.
Dr. Barrett, absolute pleasure and so excited to be on.
Oh, very cool. So I think it's real important that you tell us your story. How did you get into this arena of continuous glucose monitoring?
Yeah, it's a personal story, honestly. It was never supposed to be a business. When I was 7 years old, I was diagnosed with my first chronic disease, and it really took a long time to get that diagnosis. I went through all these dingy hospital systems. I even went to these like health retreats, which I never resonated with. Those doctors always kind of kept me out of the loop, didn't tell me what's going on. And I had this really bad experience with medicine early on. Long story short there, I got diagnosed with asthma. So I went, on the puffers, and I had to have those all the time because if I started having a panic attack or an asthma attack, that was the only thing that would make me feel better. And obviously became the cool kid really quickly, having to do that.
Right.
All the time. But it was very interesting because at that time, all the doctors were telling me, look, kid, there's nothing you can do about this. It's probably genetic, which was even at 7 weird to me because nobody in my history of family has ever had asthma. So I was like, well, how could it, something didn't add up even at that age. And they said, look, it's just something you're gonna have to live with and kind of deal with it. And so I said, okay. Well, at that time, I was actually a refugee in Germany, and they kicked my family out. They said, look, you've been here 4.5 years. Basically, go back to your own country or go somewhere else. And at that time, my parents applied to go to Canada or the States. The States was pending. Canada approved this first. So they're like, we're not risking it. We're just going to go.
Right.
And the most interesting thing was I go to Canada, and within like a year, I didn't have asthma anymore. I was playing soccer and other sports every day. I was seeing an asthma specialist, but when I would go, he would test my lung capacity, and every month it was like getting better and better to the point where we got to a point where he's like, look, you have better lungs than most kids. Like, it's unbelievable that, you're now scoring in the 95th percentile.
Right.
We're taking you off the puffer. Like, there's no need for this anymore. And it was really the first time in my life, which probably created this like natural curiosity for the rest of it, where something didn't add up, right? Like the 1 + 1 didn't equal 2. And It got me really into nutrition and trying to understand like why did my body react that way? I have this joke where if you fight off one chronic disease, you shouldn't be able to get 2.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not how the law of the universe works.
Right.
I would like it to be. I say that because I got really sick again. This was my very late teens going into my early 20s, probably like 2021. I was a basketball player, varsity basketball player, lifting weights. I'm 6'4", and I say that very specifically for one reason. When I gain weight, nobody really notices. When I lose weight, everybody notices.
Right.
So I'm like the opposite of most people, right? If I gain muscle, it's like can't really tell. If I lose weight, everyone's like, you're skinny again. So the reason I mentioned that, I lost 50 pounds in about 3 months. So
Wow.
on a 6'4" frame, it's an irrefutable reaction when you saw me, especially from an athlete, right?
Right.
to just be like, are you actually dying? Like, what is going on? So my confidence kind of shot down to zero, and I get back into this loop of what's going on, right? And so
Right.
now I'm back into doctor's offices. I'm back doing all these tests. And it was almost like a huge deja vu. I was like,
Right.
I can't
Right.
believe this is happening again. So long story short on that diagnosis, I get diagnosed with severe Crohn's disease.
Okay.
I was dropping weight like crazy and it wasn't stopping. The severity of disease state was my small intestine to my large intestine, the opening between the two, it was almost shut completely because of the scar tissue buildup from inflammation.
Wow.
When I went to do tests like they're looking at what's going on with ultrasounds, I actually had a technician, which they're not allowed to say usually. When I
Right.
said, does that look right? Because I just
Yeah.
saw black sludge on the screen. And he's like, I'm not supposed to say this, but that's not good. And so I was like,
Right.
all right, if this guy is this concerned about my health, something's really, really not good. So diagnosis was, look, you're only going to get worse. There's no way somebody in your state can get better. You're going to have to deal with this. And they scheduled me for pre-ops, meaning a pre-operational screening to then go into an operation. And at that time, I was a little bit more wise and a little bit, more educated to take this into my own hands. And so I kind of had this talk with myself and I said, I can get healthy or die trying or just kind of lay low and see what happens, which is
Right.
not going to be good. And I like to call this my shotgun approach to healthcare, which was I signed every single practitioner that there is on earth. So I had a functional medicine doctor, a naturopath, a Chinese herbalist. I had a energy healer. I had two MDs. I was doing everything else on top of. I became a Buddhist monk, meditating every day to calm the nervous system. I was doing cardio and still lifting light weights. I was doing yoga. So when I say like I really went for it, people
Yeah.
sometimes say that. I'm like, if you look at the amount of things that I threw at myself to try to get better, it was an astronomical, it was like a full-time job, right? Like every
Right.
day I was doing something or at a doctor's office or trying to see what the new thing is or correlate.
Before we continue with this great discussion, I just want to take a quick break to acknowledge this week's sponsor.
I'm constantly exploring new avenues to enhance well-being and address any health concerns. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to an exciting supplement called STEM Regen, which I take daily and genuinely believe could revolutionize your health journey as well. STEM Regen stands out as a game changer in the realm of wellness. Crafted from 5 potent plant extracts, it boasts a remarkable ability to stimulate the release of your body's own stem cells from your red bone marrow. Why is this significant? Well, stem cells are the superheroes of our body's natural repair system. They possess the extraordinary capacity to morph into various cell types, aiding in tissue regeneration and repair. As we age, the quantity of circulating stem cells in our system reduces significantly, impairing our body's ability to heal and rejuvenate itself effectively. STEM Regen steps in to counter this decline by kickstarting the release of stem cells into circulation, thereby bolstering your body's innate repair mechanisms. Once unleashed into your bloodstream, these mobilized stem cells actively seek out areas of damage or injury, initiating the healing process. By incorporating STEM Regen into your daily routine, you're essentially empowering your body to tap into its own regenerative prowess more efficiently. I firmly believe that STEM Regen could be a valuable addition to your wellness regimen, especially if you're seeking to fortify overall health and vitality, accelerate tissue repair, or expedite recovery from injury or illness. This first of its kind stem cell mobilizer is changing the game in regenerative medicine. Don't wait to unleash your body's innate healing capabilities. Visit stemregen.co/Dr. Steven, that's with a PH, and use the code SBPOD to get a 15% discount off your first order of STEM Regen. Hey Spelunkers, we're thrilled to kick off Season 6 with a fresh new look and the most exciting content we've ever delivered. This season, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of human optimization and understanding. But wait, there's more. We're giving back to our loyal listeners with an exclusive giveaway each and every episode of Season 6. That's right, prizes are waiting just for you. So how can you join in on this fun? Well, it's simple. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and here's the magic touch. Comment, "Let's Spelunk" on any of our Season 6 YouTube videos to enter. Of course, please add anything else you'd like to your review. Don't miss your chance to explore, learn, and win with the Pod of Inquiry. Let's spelunk into the wonders of Season 6 together. Right.
The reason I mentioned this story is because it does have an ending that was unexpected by everybody. I went into pre-ops and I had gained some weight back and I was doing better. And they're like, man, we have never seen anybody recover as fast as you in the time that you have from the state that you were in. So at that meeting, they actually called off the surgery. They're like, we don't have to do it.
Right.
And the experience, again, was very mixed feelings for me because the MDs, I was telling them everything that I'm doing. And they're like, well, it's just the immunosuppressant that you're on, because I did do that too on a lower dose, but I did agree to do it. And I was like, oh, there's all these other things that I'm doing. And they're like, it doesn't matter, right? But the problem was every practitioner also had kind of the same scope of view. So I would present what I'm doing and they would have a different philosophy against that protocol. Just like black and white things, it was very confusing because one practitioner or one article would say you should, eat every hour a little bit just so you're getting sustained amount of energy, because for you it's hard to get nutrients in. And somebody else would say, well, no, you should fast and let that area heal completely. And then it's like both of those things, when you present them individually, actually make sense logically, right? Like you could argue for both.
Sure.
And this is where I got super frustrated in my approach, because the care teams and providers had the best intentions with the information they had. But when I would go home, which was 99% of the time, was making decisions by myself, right? There was no way to understand what the impact was on something that I do.
Right.
And I think the important thing for people to note here is when I would go to sit down to eat in that state, there was about a 50% chance I end up in the hospital. Because what would happen is I would eat something, maybe it was a little bit too much, maybe it was the wrong thing and inflammation would go up. But the area in my intestine that was almost closed, I would get clogged sometimes.
Okay.
The worst pain I've ever felt was when that would get clogged, because my body would just start throwing up for and I'm talking like 20 hours, right? 24 hours.
Right.
Bile coming out of me, stomach acid coming out of me. And I think the best way I could describe it, knowing my body, it was just in complete shock, saying, just get everything out.
Right.
Something's really wrong here, right? And so we want to just make sure everything's out of there. And the only thing that ever made it better or got me back to, I wouldn't say normal, but being able to function, was hit up the emergency room, get IVs and anti-nausea into my veins as soon as possible.
Right.
And then, the body would relax. It would go, okay, we have nutrients now. We're hydrated again. Nothing's in our intestine that's messing us up. Let's kind of calm it down. And my barometer for success at that time, it didn't have technology to see what was going on. I couldn't tell what was going on in my body. It was, am I going longer and longer distances between hospital visits? So when you're looking at my journals, it was like, hey, I went, I didn't end up in the hospital for a couple of weeks. Awesome. Before that, it was every week or whatever it was, and so this is kind of how I was judging if I'm doing the right things, but it was all manual, right? It was all write things down, do all these protocols, go to a meeting with my provider, and then explain all the things that I did. And it's like, now the meeting's almost done by the time we got to everything that we've done. So I really felt like, even though I should have had all the support, it was very hard to get all the support on the same page, make good decisions that are data driven. And, it was kind of a brute force approach. And thankfully, because I did so many experiments in a row and was able to correlate things over time, I ended up, after 2 years, haven't ended up in the hospital since. I was able to travel Southeast Asia eating spicy food off, street vendors, which is probably the epitome of what I shouldn't have been able to do in any scenario. And then, I built successful businesses. And so Now I'm in a state where I'm much better and much healthier. My last colonoscopy showed zero signs of disease. There are days where I still, feel like there is an impact in my intestines. And it doesn't mean I can't eat. If I eat a whole pizza and it's the worst type, like processed cheese with antibiotics, etc., like all the things that people with IBD shouldn't be able to eat, I can definitely eat those. Would I feel great the next day?
No.
Would anybody,
Right.
as good as I can feel? And so it was basically another window into, look, there's got to be more to how we handle our bodies in healthcare, because I had such a hard time growing up in two situations in my life where it was literally a lot of the, like, now looking back, it was basically like life and death in terms of considerations and decisions made.
Right.
And then throughout my whole life, after both of those situations, I have always wanted a way to see inside my body, because I was like, if I can see inside my body, the decisions that I was making would have been so much easier and so much more accurate, because I wouldn't have to guess and then hope not to end up in the hospital and then have to mentally be prepared to guess again. Those were the things that I yearned for. Luckily, I also got into ad tech, advertising technology, off the
Okay.
back of this. And it was kind of mind blowing to me that I know everything about people online, like what sites you clicked on, how many times you clicked on them, how
Right.
many ads did you click on, what are you spending time on? Did you open my emails? Like, this technology is unbelievable, right? It's so good.
Right.
And it's been transferred to many other things in life. Your phone has, how good is your battery performing? Is it slow? Is it overheating? Your
Right.
car has the same thing. Your TV is now smart, right? So this technology of tracking things and analytics has been transferred to many different things. But the one thing that we really missed out on is putting it onto our biology.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I got into continuous glucose monitors as there's a bigger vision behind this, but as the first use case, I saw that, hey, we now have a biosensor that reads your blood glucose, which is directly tied to your metabolic health, that's always on. I'm
Right.
like, finally, right? Like, this is what I would have wanted when I was sick, or even not sick, but just to make the right decisions.
Right.
And so the way I see it is, this is our first real use case of getting biology streaming so that we can build analytics around it. And that was the founding story of Theia, which now uses the technology in many different ways.
So let me ask you a couple questions, because I think you brought some important points up. You moved from Germany to Canada, and
Yeah,
your asthma got better. What do you
yeah.
attribute that to? Was it environmental?
I do believe a lot of it was environmental, but I also believe a lot of it was mental.
Okay.
So when I moved to Germany, it was as a refugee with my mom. My dad stayed in the war, and I was like 2.5, 3 years old. So my formative years got super disrupted and lots of uncertainty unknowns. And I think that played some impact at that time in terms of my psychological state coming out and my physical state.
Right.
The second thing is, I don't know about you or in the States, but in Europe, everybody chain smoked in the early 90s when you went to somebody's house. And so
Okay.
whenever family or friends would be over, they would literally just hotbox the house with cigarettes.
Okay.
My poor mother, she tried hard because she put all the kids in one room and then put towels under the under the
The
doors so
door.
the smoke
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it still comes through. And then when they leave, it's still in the house, right?
Right.
So I think those two combos, if I had to peg it, were probably the two bigger reasons.
Okay.
And like you said, once we moved to Canada, I actually had fights with my parents around the smoking, more specifically with my mom. My dad wasn't a big smoker, but during stressful periods, my mom would smoke.
Right.
And I would, basically tell her, like, look, you're you're impacting your son, and like, I don't want you to smoke. It was hard for her, but to her credit, she quit smoking and has kept off.
That's great. Now, when did you integrate CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, in your personal journey?
Oh, just only about 2 years ago.
Okay. So
Yeah,
you got yourself better
yeah,
empirically, and now you wish you had the biomarker of CGM back when you were really sick, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay. Now,
yeah.
did you change your diet quite a bit?
Yes, I did a lot of diet testing. I read every book, Dr. Mark Hyman, all
Right.
these books that were out at the time, and it was basically a experiment every single day, multiple times a day, right? So it was
Right.
like, okay, first, because I had a lot of blood work done, is there severe deficiencies? How do we fill those, and which food has those fills?
Right.
Then, if I ate those foods, would I flare up? Would I have inflammation? And then slowly realizing which ones those are and eliminating them.
Right.
Then it was, what big of a portion could I actually eat where it wouldn't get stuck in my intestines and which types of food.
Right.
So this was a real battle every single day. And I changed my diet multiple times. And I think it evolved, as I got better, it also evolved because I could eat more nutrient dense things and it was a little bit risky, but I always put in a little bit more risk where I was like, okay, let me go eat some nuts and just see if my intestines is actually doing well, right? And it's like
Right.
those things can scrape your intestines and flame you. But
Right.
and I'm not advocating people do that. I'm just saying as I kept getting better and better, I kept,
Integrating more
allocating the
foods.
diet. Yeah,
Yeah.
integrating more foods or different ones and just seeing how I'm impacted.
So I mean, if you could put a name on the type of diet that you ultimately kind of figured out, would it be more like a Mediterranean diet, or was it keto or low carb? What?
Yeah. Everyone always, I haven't had one person ask me, like, what specific diet? I think so. When I first started out, I'll kind of give you the phases, right? When I first started out, it was a lot about detoxing and then remineralizing and refilling deficiencies.
Right.
So there were a couple of things that were super helpful in doing so. The broth from rice, for whatever reason, did really well for me. I have had other people where that hasn't been the case. It's
Mhm.
basically like broth from rice. It has a little bit of nutrients, but it would, because of the way that it was sticky, it would help line my intestines.
Right.
Marshmallow root extract did the same thing. It would kind of line intestines. I was on Chinese herbal medicines, meaning I had to drink the sludge that you
Right.
like. It was like a witch's cauldron sludge that you basically steep all these herbs inside a cauldron for like 5 hours. Your whole house stinks to this day,
Wow.
probably stinks. And I had to chug that twice a day, which was like a detox, like get all the garbage out. And then
Right.
after I got the garbage out, I would take the marshmallow root or the rice
Okay.
extract. It definitely wasn't, I tried the keto and I tried vegan and stuff like that. The problem was any kind of sharpy type of aggregated type of food, like a veggie,
Right.
could scrape my intestines. That time they're like destroyed, right? So
Right.
anything that would scrape it, there's no barrier of
Right.
protection. So I
Right.
really stayed away from those. I did a lot of mushy rice helped because it would be quick energy. And again, that broth from it was awesome. Very plain, moist chicken just to be able to get, proteins in.
Hmm.
Bone broth was a staple. I know some people have like mast cell reactions that do terribly in bone broth. So again, I'm not telling anybody to do these things if they're listening,
Right.
but these were the decisions I was making is more what I'm trying to get at, right? Is like
Right.
if I have these toxins, how do we get those out safely? How do we start realigning the intestines and making it feel safe and not inflamed? How do we introduce foods that I know are going to be good? Potatoes were really good, baked, not hard, just very soft. Any veggie, if I were to try it, would be in a soup form.
Hmm.
So that was helpful just to be like, okay, can I get them in? Very much had to play around with that because, one veggie could not respond well or just be super
Right.
high in oxalates, and then the stomach acids were off anyway, and then that would be a concern. So as I progressed though, I would get more and more confident and maybe introduce a little bit of red meat. Better fats started coming in. Vitamin, fish oil was actually a staple because I was super deficient in vitamin D and omegas. So I would try to
Mm.
get that in a liquid form. So that first phase was a lot of liquids, broths, things
Right.
that can line intestines. The second phase was introducing more whole foods, and I actually started to go away from such high carb content.
Right.
to be able to get some of those other nutrients in there and not be, crushing myself with carbs all the time. But it's like
Right.
in the beginning that really did help.
Right.
And eventually I got to a point like when I was really feeling better, it was a keto-ish diet, I would say, more Mediterranean style. I actually started eating raw veggies to see how those would
Wow.
do, and they were doing okay. So I was like, okay, lots of meat at that time, eggs, turkey bacon, bacons. I would actually have a big salad every night and start doing that and start reintroducing vegetables. And
Right.
after that, that was the first three phases. Then the fourth one was, can I eat anything? The answer is yes, but
Be careful.
eating it wasn't like eat junk food.
Right.
I don't feel like I even had to be careful, because I would test this. One night I ate a whole box of Oreos.
Hmm.
I don't recommend
Yeah.
doing that.
Right.
So I was bloated on my stomach, but not so much. I didn't feel anything in my intestines. And I was like, okay, I feel like my immune system's back and my digestion's back because that
Right.
was a huge A, glycemic load, B, lots of toxins, and C, just overall way too much food at once. And that was a good barometer to say, of course, this is a terrible idea for anybody to ever do.
Right.
But at that time, I was like, let's do a massive test. And, it was
Gotcha.
okay. Like I didn't end up in the hospital, etc. So those are like my four phases. And I've gone in and out of different ones since then,
Right.
depending on, now it's more goal driven versus preventing
Right.
myself from ending up in the hospital.
Yeah. That's a hell of a story because, you know,
Yeah.
a young individual usually doesn't encounter those kinds of severe problems. That's, kind of a rare subset. But
Yeah.
and now a message from our sponsor. The power of ketones, your body's alternative fuel. The folks at Approved Medical Solutions have done it again. That's right, with their new Clean Ketone Supplement. Imagine your body as a hybrid car capable of running on two different fuel sources. While glucose is your body's regular gasoline, ketones are like switching to an efficient, clean-burning alternative fuel. I would say rocket fuel. When your body produces ketones, whether through fasting, low-carb dieting, or intense exercise, something remarkable happens. These molecular powerhouses cross the blood-brain barrier, providing crystal clear mental energy that many describe as enhanced focus and clarity. But ketones aren't just brain fuel. They're efficient energy sources for your heart, muscles, and other vital organs. Think of them as premium-grade fuel that produces less metabolic waste than glucose processing. Research suggests ketones may offer additional benefits, reduced inflammation, improved metabolic health, and even potential neuroprotective properties. They're particularly interesting for athletes seeking sustained energy and anyone looking to optimize their cognitive performance. The best part? Your body is naturally designed to produce and use ketones. It's not about completely replacing glucose, it's about metabolic flexibility, giving your body the ability to thrive on both fuel sources. Whether you're interested in mental clarity, athletic performance, or overall health, understanding and harnessing the power of ketones might be your key to unlocking new levels of well-being. Approved Medical Solutions Clean Ketone Formula contains nature-identical ketones. These ketones provide the same fuel as those produced through a keto diet. Approved Medical Solutions Ketone Formula does not contain sugar, caffeine, or 1,3-butane-diol, and they are not ketone salts. I've been using them routinely now and notice a minimum of a 10% increase in exercise performance. By diving deep into cutting-edge research and real-world applications with leading scientists and practitioners, the Pod of Inquiry illuminates the science-backed path to enhancing your mind and body's potential. You can find us on all platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please join us. So let's get into continuous glucose monitoring, because I think that's one of the most powerful tools of biohacking and overall health.
Yep.
I mean, in the epidemic that we have now of chronic disease, cardiovascular, cancers, stroke, all of these things, there's always a tie-in to what are the metabolomics, what is going on metabolically with these folks. And probably 15 years ago, everybody would just write it off. It's like, oh, it's genetic. There's nothing that you can do about it. Well, we know
Right.
that you have genetics and then epigenetics, right? So you can be dealt a bad shuffle of cards,
Yeah.
and doesn't necessarily mean if you live a great lifestyle that you're going to manifest those things that are genetically coded for you. So I think there's a lot of power in that. And I personally did 6 months of CGM monitoring probably about 5, 6 years ago, when I really started to try to dial in on metabolism.
Yep.
And it was unbelievably powerful. You talk about something that changes behavior. This really changes behavior, because you you may know that something might not be optimal for you from a glycemic index standpoint, but until you see it register on the meter, you don't really have an appreciation like that. I mean, it's kind of like hypertension in a way, because you don't feel like you're hypertensive unless you're really stressed out. Like, oh man, my blood pressure is really going up. But if you're 20 or 30 millimeters of mercury higher than normal, you don't know that. And
Right.
the same thing goes with what is the glycemic load of these things that you're eating. And then, so you can do a lot of testing with it. And I think that not only from the standpoint of testing, but also the standpoint that when you do cheat or do something that you may not want to admit, when that glucose spikes up,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, stupid, don't eat that again,
Yeah.
or don't eat that for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And so then about 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, we were out at the meeting in San Diego when I met you.
Yep.
And you hooked me up on your CGM and your Theia program. And I thought I had it pretty well dialed in because of my experience. But then I
Yeah.
realized, no, I needed this, big time, because there would be certain little things that I would do that would spike that glucose, but it was so fun to keep it in this narrow little range.
Yeah.
And that's where really health begins. And I think if people would do CGM monitoring on a routine basis, it would be as important to their diet and their nutrition status as more than anything else I can think of at this time. So tell us about what your company does versus just somebody going out and getting a Dexcom 7 or a Freestyle Libre 3. Tell us how you've taken this to the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started using continuous glucose monitors, such as the ones that you're talking about, it was eye-opening for me, and I had a lot of research behind me, and I obviously did a lot of work on myself. So it was still amazing just to see the data, but it quickly became a so what equation in my head. Okay, so my glucose is doing something, so now I need to know in context why it's doing that and what should I do about it, right?
Right.
And so then I was like, okay, well, I really see a future here where we can build a software layer that can take, yeah, sure, right now it's glucose, and then make it super easy to understand in a scoring format, right? So everybody knows 0 to 100 since grade 1, for example. We give a metabolic score. I was like, what if we make a metabolic score that's daily and real time, and it's showing you how your body's performing at all times? And it's something you understand. Am I 100 out of 100 or am I 50 out of 100, right?
Right.
Those are things that even a kid can know that they're doing good or they need to improve something or take a look, right?
Right.
And so I was like, that would be awesome. But then I was like, what you really need is correlating what you're doing and then showing you how it impacted you. So if you eat something, how did that food score? If you do a cold plunge, how did that cold plunge do for your body? Everyone assumes it's great, right? Oh, cold plunges are awesome. What if you're already undernourished and stressed out and you do a cold plunge? It's not actually going to be great for you. Typically, it could be, right?
Right.
And this is where I was like, okay, these devices were made for diabetics to dose insulin.
Right.
And that's it. And these are medical device companies making medical devices.
Correct.
For anybody outside of that use case, it's not a great experience, if at all a good experience, unless they know what to do with the data. So our goal was, why don't we make software and an app where you can log your foods, your activities, your meals, your meditations, whatever you're doing, and we'll show you how your body is responding to that.
Right.
So it gives a nice feedback loop on everything that you're doing. You're being reinforced that it's the right thing, or you're being course corrected, right?
Right.
And so there's no more guesswork in doing so. On top of that, we send that data back to the practitioner or care provider. And now that, all the 7 doctors that I had, they could now see what's going on with my body at all times. So when they go to make a suggestion, when I meet with them, when they go to review my files, we got rid of all this work of administrative burden and asking questions of how you're doing and what you've been up to. You just know now, right? And it saves everybody a ton of time, and you can actually use the time that you paid for in a more productive way.
Right.
So our end mission here is, I think we've just started. My hypothesis is, and all the data is backing this up, we've now pierced the corporate veil, if you want to say, of getting biological data always on for the first time in the history of humanity. Like, this has never been possible before. And this market is about to take off.
Right.
So we're going to have other types of biomarkers always on, other ways to gather your data, different formats. We're talking with companies that have patches you take on and off that measure your glucose so that it doesn't have to pierce the skin. Like, this technology is like literally in its infancy, and nobody's really built it for people to be able to action it day to day. So we're building the software layer that's going to be able to take all this data, make it simple, make it actionable, predict future health outcomes, and have this nice unity between the provider and the end user. And that's something that excites me tremendously, because it's literally what I wish I had when I was sick.
Right. And there's one other benefit of CGM that most people don't even think about, and that is it's kind of an interesting stress monitor.
Yes.
Because you can be in a fasting state, and if you're put into a stressful response, what happens? You get you get an increased cortisol level, and that's going to ultimately release more glucose from the liver, because you're in that fight or flight state. And so sometimes you'll see things in addition to the glycemic index, but you'll see a stress index, like, oh man, I get in the room with this one particular patient that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. All of a sudden you can see that little spike, and it's kind of a stress meter in a way too. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, I think this is you brought up the best point, right? People have this perception that glucose is to monitor blood sugar based on diet alone.
Right.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. The fact that you have blood sugar levels always on is the key, right? Because if it's not always on, it's a finger prick, then sure. But always on is now you can correlate how your metabolism responds to anything.
Right.
So I'll give some black and white examples. There might be a patient that is doing really well, and then on Wednesday nights, they have really terrible metabolic health and something's all over the place. And it could be they're hanging out with somebody every Wednesday that stresses them out, is not good for their life, etc. Or they're watching the news. We've seen this multiple times. Like you said, they're stressed out. The news is always, it's negative driven because that's what people are drawn to.
Right.
And it's not good for your metabolic health. Okay, now I know. We've seen cases where people go into homes with mold and they have this reaction in their metabolic health. Okay, now you know that house is mold. The glucose is all over when you're sleeping. Now we know you didn't sleep well, right? So it's the correlation of what you're doing and the data that's actually the important part. The data itself is awesome if you know how to interpret it, which almost nobody knows.
Right. So you mentioned this, and I think it's a good point. Why don't you tell everybody what your company does as far as the reporting and that type of thing? Because I think this is not only interesting for the practitioners who listen to this show, but also the public that listens to it.
Yeah, for sure. So once somebody has our app and it's connected to their biosensor, we really have one ask of the client is, hey, can you just take quick photos of what you're doing? It doesn't have to be food either. You can take photos at the gym or tag them, etc. But what this does then is our algorithm looks at, when you did this thing, how did your body respond? And it gives you a score of 0 to 100, 100 being the best. And so now, anytime you log anything, we actually give you data and feedback to show you how your body's doing. This becomes super powerful over time because we start showing you trend lines, right? Hey,
Right.
you've been doing great for 2 months. You fell off this week. What's going on?
Right.
And the provider can see this data too. So if you're on a care plan and you are working with somebody, this is super transparent now on what is going on. And you're always reminded of if something's working or not. And so all this ambiguity over what diet is the best, which supplements should I be taking, should I take a drug or not? This is the first time where you can actually see if something's working and course correct
Right.
before, waiting a year or 3 months or whatever the check-in is or another lab report. And to me, there's nothing more impactful than how can we make decisions faster to get on the right track versus having to guess, and you could spend years doing that, right?
Right.
And so we've made that simple, that whole process super simple and transparent for everybody in between.
So if there's a physician out there that wants to get their patients enrolled in your program, let's talk about that, because I think number one, you guys are super affordable for
Yep.
what you're doing. So I want to talk about the cost, because
Sure.
cost is always a barrier to entry for many, many patients.
Yep.
And then talk about how they can go about integrating with, because you guys do a lot of all of the heavy lifting for the
Yeah.
practitioner, which is a really big deal because everybody's so busy in their practices now
Yeah.
that it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to implement another thing here. And then there's hurdles and, the learning curve and all this other stuff. You guys have done a great job from kind of just getting up that learning curve and the implementation curve as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, we made it super easy. Practitioner can sign up on our website, or there's going to be a link, below that I gave you. And then it's a quick 1-minute form you fill out, just a little bit of info about your business. Our team reviews just to make sure it's a real business. We have a
Right.
lot of people try to sign up and they're not, legitimate. Within 24 hours, you're approved. You get onboarded. There's videos, documentation, etc. Usually like 5 minutes of that. You can just skip it if you know what to do. And then you have your own platform where you have links where you can send your patients to get onboarded to the platform, and we will take care of everything end to end. We write a prescription, a pharmacy, we pay the pharmacy fees, we get your patient onboarded, we send them the sensors, we ship it in the mail. So there's no inventory to be held. There's no customer service you need to do. There's no like super complex, process that you have to go through over weeks. Within literally 24 hours, this is all done and you can start selling. You can invite people from the platform. You can pay for them. A lot of practices now have us part of a program. And so they just put that cost into the program,
Right.
invite that user once they paid into our platform, just the name and email, and we onboard them from there. So we've just made that process super simple. And I did that on purpose because to your point, I was like, the last thing practitioners want or health businesses want is more work. Even
Right.
if the solution is awesome and great, that's the number one, every doctor I know, every health business I know, the owners are super busy. So that's the last thing that they want, right? The price point is super simple. It's $99 for an activation fee that includes us writing a prescription, doctor's fees, pharmacy fees, onboarding the patient, teaching them how to use the hardware, teaching them how to use the app. And then for the hardware itself is also $99. And that includes the hardware, but includes the software, the daily metabolic reporting, the activity reporting. They get weekly insight reports. We prompt them to see what's going on. If they haven't logged something and we see irregularities in the metabolic health,
Right.
we provide all the sensor support. Sometimes they fall off, sometimes they're faulty. The tech is amazing. It's not perfect, right?
Right.
Our care team provides that, and it includes a free shipping fee in there. So they don't have to worry about shipping costs. We just send it to their house.
So I would recommend, if anybody out there who's in practice where you see patients that are metabolically challenged, which I don't think there's a practitioner in the United States that doesn't fit that scenario. So, but and you're still a little reluctant to maybe implement this program, full bore for your patients. I would recommend that you actually contact Boris and his company and actually do it yourself for a month. And you will be shocked because things that you're eating that you think might be great for you are not so great for you. And it will change your personal journey for health. And very quickly, when you see it's good for you, then you'll probably want to get it into the practice and in your paradigm for taking care of people that have some metabolic issues. And even if you're not diabetic, you want to keep from being diabetic. This is the way to do it. So, you have that bowl of ice cream, and then when you see that thing spike up, you could say to yourself, well, maybe I ought to find an alternative or just go without. So, super powerful. Boris, before we just get off, can you tell everybody the website, where to go, just the specifics so that they can get to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is Theia Health, TheaHealth.ai. And there's just a big button that says click here to apply. Again, it's a 2-minute max process. There's a link here, Dr. Barrett has put it in there, where it's his link with a little bit more detail. So I recommend doing that one versus our site. But yeah, either way works. And that's it. We would love to service anybody that has any patient, because the whole point of this is it doesn't matter what the patient is battling through, whether it's cancer, whether it's trying to lose weight, whether it's preventing diabetes. The data is so invaluable, and we've made it so simple to understand. In any use case, this is an awesome thing to do. And like, to your point, try it out yourself. Lots of practitioners do, probably like 60% of practitioners try it right away and just see the power of it. And there's no better incentive than, seeing it yourself.
Oh, absolutely. You can read a journal article, but until you see that phenomenon in clinic, it doesn't resonate as much as when it's a real life experience. And so highly recommend your stuff. I think it's great. I really appreciate having you on today, and hopefully some people will positively change their lives after listening to this episode.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett. You're yourself such a force in the industry, and you're doing so much good for people. And I always say when I do an interview like this, you're type of person that helped me, when I was on basically in my deathbeds. So even though I had, mixed reactions with practitioners, I'm sure you guys collectively have helped me in tremendous ways. So I appreciate you and for everything you do and having a voice in the industry.
Well, it's a mutual feeling when you have a great platform like what you've developed. So thanks, Boris.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett.
As you know, I'm passionate about learning new ways to address health concerns. Moreover, before I recommend any treatment or supplement, I always try it on myself. Today, I want to share my experience with Troche. I have investigated other phytocannabinoid formulas and found that, in general, they were not consistent or reliable in their results. What impressed me about the Troche delivery technology is that each rapid-release tab is engineered to provide fast-acting, long-lasting, reliable delivery of phytocannabinoids to support your health and well-being. Many physicians understand the importance of using phytocannabinoids for physical discomfort, sleep issues, and mood. But if the formula is not reliable, most patients will give up, never experiencing the real benefits. I put this to the test on myself and actually tracked my progress. This graph shows my results for reducing stress. Troche is so serious about how well their product works, they partnered with People Science to provide the Troche Tracker health assessment application that lets you monitor your progress and works with you to accomplish your wellness goals. If you are a patient, click the link below and the patient button to register for Troche Tracker. Assess your baseline health metrics and receive a free Troche sample in addition to getting preferred patient pricing on all products. If you are a clinician interested in adding Troche to your practice, click the link below and then the clinician button to register for a wholesale affiliate account, or go to the link above. I hope you all enjoyed today's show and got some truly empowering knowledge out of it. You can always follow up on anything we talked about in the show notes found at our website, podofinquiry.com. If you think you might have tickled just a few neurons inside that cerebral cortex, please spread the word to your friends and colleagues and tell them that they need to get spelunking. Also, if you can take a minute to leave a review on your podcast provider of choice, and especially Apple Podcasts, that would greatly help the show and be so appreciated, provided it's positive. And if not, then just keep your pie hole shut and stay down in that cave. Let's keep spelunking.
This podcast is designed for informational purposes only and does not constitute any medical or surgical consulting advice or imply a development of any physician-patient relationship. The opinions of guests who are featured on the show are not necessarily the opinions of Dr. Barrett or the production team. This podcast is owned solely by Barrett Medical and Surgical Media, LLC. While the show is highly oriented for physicians and healthcare providers, anyone interested in the improvement of human performance and understanding will find this a welcome goblet to sip from or guzzle. However, no representation or warranties are made in any way whatsoever on this podcast for any products, techniques, or other things discussed. Invited guests are not vetted by the Pod of Inquiry for their qualifications and may have a direct or indirect financial interest in what they present and discuss on the show. The Pod of Inquiry disclaims any responsibility from anything taken from the show and used personally or professionally. It is a responsibility of the listener to perform their own due diligence prior to the implementation of any ideas, products, techniques, or anything talked about on the show.